Hi, I want to give this interview because there is a lot of misconception around about a group of new initiatives that have been introduced with regards to security for seafarers, introduced by the IMO. The shipping industry aren't grasping what's required under these new initiatives. And I just want to expand it and give a general idea to people of the requirements and the timescales required.
Okay, that's great. Could you tell me why this has happened?
Yeah, in 2010 the IMO at a meeting in Manila penned what are called the STCW 2010 Manila Amendments. And this was a wide-ranging focus group, but focusing on the security side, it was perceived that there was a lack of awareness, general awareness from general seafarers. Ever since the introduction of the ISPS code, there have been certain course requirements, but it's become apparent, and especially during this latest phase of piracy in the Indian Ocean over the last 5 years or so, that there was a lack of situational awareness with regards to general security from seafarers.
Under these amendments, what ISPS security courses are now available for seafarers?
There are now 3 courses available to seafarers. There's the existing ship security officer, which in effect is a senior deck officer position and is an appointment on board the ship, and that's been available since the introduction of the ISPS code in 2002. The 2 new courses address people lower down the command chain. The first one is the PDSD, which is the Proficiency in Designated Security Duties, which in effect is, as it says, is aimed at people with designated security duties. So ostensibly you're looking at the deck department with regards to watchkeepers at sea in a high risk area, or it could be a gangway watch alongside in the port. Also, the PSA, which is the Proficiency in Security Awareness, is a shorter course and will be required by all other seafarers. Seafarer being defined by the Maritime Labour Convention, which will include everybody else. And on a general cargo ship, you're talking the engine department and any other supernumerary staff on board. If you were looking at passenger vessels, you're talking everybody on board, from shop staff to catering, food and beverage, through to spa staff. Everybody now has to have a formal security awareness, and both these courses are STCW competencies.
This new mandatory security training, do you think it's a positive step for the shipping industry?
It's definitely a positive. There will be people in the shipping industry who look at it and think, we've got more courses now, people have got to pay for these courses, whether it's done by the individual or the company. But what it does do, it brings into place a systematic approach, and more people will have a better understanding and a situational awareness of security before and when they're on the vessel.
Just moving to another subject, looking at training required for guys that are working in the maritime security market, the chaps that are doing armed security for merchant vessels, should they hold the ship security officer or the Proficiency in Designated Security Duty certificate?
Since 2008, when there was a big explosion in the manpower requirements for maritime security personnel, especially as it morphed into armed security since 2008, there was the only one course there that people could use to demonstrate their security staff's understanding of the ISPS code, and that was the SSO course. And the SSO course is not an anti-piracy course, and is far too long, over 3 days, 21 hours of training for the average maritime security operator going on board to a ship, given that all he really needs to understand is the security code of practice that merchant seamen have to operate under, i.e. the ISPS code. So with the introduction of the PDSD, which the UK MCA have made a requirement for privately contracted armed security personnel, i.e. security personnel working at sea on ships, they have made the PDSD the minimum requirement. It's 10 hours of training. It gives more than enough information about the ISPS code for a contractor, a maritime security contractor on board a ship. And that is now the new minimum standard, and the SSO is surplus to requirements for the majority of maritime security personnel.
Thank you for that, John. Could you tell me what date do the seafarers have to comply with this new training? When do they have to undertake the proficiency in designated security duties and the proficiency in security awareness courses by?
Officially, the regulation was introduced in January 2012, but to give people time to get the training in place and for shipping companies to understand the obligations, it will not be enforced by Port State Control until January 2014. Here we are at January 2013, so there's literally 1 year. In my experience from the implementation of the ISPS code 10 years ago, there was a mad rush at the end for companies to get the training, to get people compliant. We are one of the first companies to be approved to undertake this training.
Could you tell me what the implications are for a ship if the seafarers on board do not have the correct certification for January 2014?
Yep, like any Port State Control inspection, if they don't have, if the ship does not have the right certification for all the crew members on board, the ship ultimately could be impounded and stopped from trading until it's put right, in worst case scenario. If you think about the new big cruise ships with nearly 1,500 to 2,000 crew on board, it has massive implications. The timelines are tight to get this in place. General cargo vessels will not have as much of a problem with lean man crews on board, but certainly for the passenger industry, there's going to need to be a lot of thought into this. And again, it comes back to definition of seafarer under the Maritime Labour Convention, which again is a new initiative which will be introduced in August of 2013.
What advice can you give to ship management companies now to make sure that their crews have the correct certification?
There are a couple of things that they can do. Obviously, as we all know, time creeps up on us very quickly. You now have a year to get this in place. So depending on how many crew members need training, whether it's left to the individual or they're trained by the company, they really do need to have a plan in place to make sure that ships sail next January with the correct certification for all seafarers.
Thanks very much for that, John. That seems to have clarified the situation for the shipping industry.
No, it's good, Nick. It's good to be able to get this out there and give an insight to the shipping industry, because there is a lot of misconception out there, and the last thing we want to see is people's livelihoods being stopped from trading. We're here. We are one of the first companies to be approved to deliver this training. We understand the requirements, and if anybody needs more information, we're here and ready to help.